There's a plant that has been traditionally used for centuries and has recently been attracting scientific interest because of one particularly intriguing characteristic. It may act at different stages involved in blood sugar regulation in the body. Its name is Gymnema sylvestre. And what makes it especially interesting is that researchers have been studying the potential effects of this plant on everything from the perception of sweetness to processes related to glucose absorption and insulin function. But there is one mechanism that stands out in particular. It is the third mechanism. And before we get there, you need to understand what happens inside your body when insulin resistance develops. Because once you understand the problem, it becomes much easier to understand why this plant has attracted so much scientific interest. Stay with me until the end, because we're also going to talk about how Gymnema is used in research studies, what precautions are important, and most importantly, why it should never be used on your own as a replacement for medical treatment. What is insulin resistance? Imagine you just ate rice, bread, cake, or another food rich in carbohydrates. During digestion, those carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. The glucose enters your bloodstream, and your pancreas releases insulin. Insulin's job is to help glucose move from the bloodstream into your cells, where it can be used for energy. That's how the process normally works. The problem begins when your cells gradually become less responsive to insulin. That's when what we call insulin resistance can develop. Think of it like a door. Insulin is like a key trying to unlock that door. When everything is working properly, the door opens and glucose can enter the cells. But with insulin resistance, that door becomes increasingly difficult to open. Your body tries to compensate by producing more insulin. And for a long period of time, the pancreas may continue working under an increased demand. This process can happen silently. That's exactly why changes in blood sugar regulation deserve attention, proper monitoring, and appropriate testing. And this is where Gymnema sylvestre becomes particularly interesting. But the first mechanism happens in a place you probably wouldn't expect. On your tongue. Mechanism number 1, the taste of sweetness. Gymnema sylvestre contains compounds known as gymnemic acids. Research has investigated the ability of these compounds to interfere with the perception of sweet taste. In practical terms, this may cause certain sweet foods to taste different for a period of time. And why could that be interesting? Because frequent consumption of highly sweet foods can make it harder to follow a diet focused on blood sugar control. If the desire for extremely sweet foods is reduced, it may become easier for some people to cut back on these products. But it's important to make one thing clear. This does not mean that the plant simply eliminates the desire for sugar in everyone. However, its effects on receptors involved in the perception of sweetness are among the most studied characteristics of Gymnema. And there is another mechanism that may be even more important. It happens after you swallow your food, in your intestines. Mechanism number 2, glucose absorption. After you eat a carbohydrate-rich food, some of those carbohydrates are digested and broken down into smaller molecules, including glucose. That glucose then needs to pass through the intestines to enter the bloodstream. And this process depends on transporter proteins found in the intestinal cells. The compounds found in Gymnema are being studied precisely because of their potential influence on this process. The idea is fairly simple. If the rate or amount of glucose being absorbed is reduced, the rise in blood sugar after a meal may also be affected. Some experimental and clinical studies have investigated this potential effect. But here, we need to make an important distinction. The results can vary depending on the study, the preparation used, the dosage, and the characteristics of the participants. For that reason, it would not be accurate to claim that everyone who takes Gymnema will automatically experience a specific 50% reduction in blood glucose. Numbers like that need to be interpreted within the context of the specific study that produced them. And now we arrive at the most interesting point of this entire discussion, because the effects we've talked about so far occur either before or during the process of glucose entering the body. But what if the plant could also influence the way the body itself responds to insulin? That we get to mechanism number 3, the beta cells of the pancreas. The pancreas contains specialized cells known as beta cells. These are the cells responsible for producing insulin. And we know that changes in the function of these cells are associated with the progression of type 2 diabetes. That's why researchers are interested in identifying substances that may help preserve or improve beta cell function. And Gymnema sylvestre has become part of this area of research. Some experimental studies suggest that certain compounds found in the plant may have effects on the function and survival of beta cells. There are also animal studies that have investigated potential effects related to the regeneration or recovery of these cells. But here's a crucial point. This does not mean that Gymnema has been proven to regenerate the human pancreas or cure diabetes. That distinction is extremely important. Results observed in animals or in small studies cannot automatically be turned into a treatment promise for human beings. Even so, this line of research is interesting because it helps explain why Gymnema continues to attract scientific attention. And perhaps this is the most fascinating part. The plant isn't being studied only because of what it may do to the glucose you just consumed. Researchers are also investigating its potential effects on the mechanisms involved in glucose metabolism. And there is another pathway worth looking at: the ability of your cells to respond to insulin. Mechanism number 4, insulin sensitivity. Let's go back to our comparison with the door. Insulin is the key. The cell is the door. With insulin resistance, that door doesn't respond properly to the signal. That's why improving insulin sensitivity is one of the main goals when we're talking about glucose metabolism. Studies involving Gymnema are investigating precisely these potential effects on glucose utilization and insulin sensitivity. The idea is that if cells respond more effectively to insulin, the body may be able to use glucose more efficiently. But there is an important detail. Gymnema should not be presented as some kind of lubricant that simply fixes insulin receptors. Human metabolism is much more complex than that. What we have are studies suggesting potential metabolic effects that still need to be interpreted carefully. And when we put all of these mechanisms together, we arrive at one of the most important tests for anyone monitoring their blood sugar: A1C, or glycated hemoglobin. Mechanism number 5. Glycated hemoglobin. You've probably heard of the famous HbA1c, also known as glycated hemoglobin. It is different from measuring your blood sugar at a single point in time. While a blood glucose measurement shows you what your blood sugar level is at that specific moment, glycated hemoglobin provides a broader picture of how your blood sugar has been behaving over approximately the past 3 months. That's why it is so important when monitoring diabetes. Some studies have investigated the use of Gymnema in people with blood sugar abnormalities and have observed changes in markers such as blood glucose and glycated hemoglobin. But once again, we need to be careful. These results do not mean that the plant will work the same way for everyone. They also do not mean that someone can stop taking their medication simply because they have started using a supplement. What these studies show is that there is an interesting area of research that deserves to be understood and investigated responsibly. And now we can put all the pieces together. How do the 5 mechanisms connect? Let's recap. First, Gymnema may interfere with the perception of sweet taste. Second, its compounds are being studied for their potential effects on the intestinal absorption of glucose. Third, researchers are investigating possible effects on the beta cells of the pancreas. Fourth, studies are evaluating potential effects related to insulin sensitivity. Fifth, clinical research has also investigated changes in markers such as blood glucose and glycated hemoglobin. It is precisely this combination of potential mechanisms that makes Gymnema so interesting to scientific researchers. But now comes the practical question. How is it actually used? In the material that served as the basis for this video, the use of standardized Gymnema sylvestre extract with a defined concentration of gymnemic acids is mentioned. A dose of 400 milligrams per day, divided into 2 doses taken before the main meals, is also mentioned. But there is an important difference between reporting a dose used in a particular study and recommending that same dose for everyone. Those are 2 different things. The appropriate dose can depend on the specific product, the concentration of its active compounds, the person's health conditions, and, most importantly, any other medications they may be taking. That's why the most important information here is not simply to memorize a number. It's to understand that supplements can also have pharmacological effects and may interact with medications. Be careful when combining Gymnema with medications. If you take diabetes medications such as metformin, sulfonylureas, or insulin, do not start using Gymnema on your own. This is especially important because any substance that contributes to lowering blood glucose may, under certain circumstances, increase the risk of hypoglycemia when combined with other treatments. And there's another crucial point. Do not stop taking a medication simply because you watched a video on the internet. If Gymnema becomes part of your approach to managing your health, that decision should be discussed with the healthcare professional who monitors your condition. The goal is not to replace one treatment with another. The goal is to make safer, more informed decisions. Gymnema sylvestre is not a miracle plant, and it certainly should not be presented as a cure for diabetes. But it is a plant that has attracted scientific interest because it appears to have several different mechanisms that are being studied in relation to glucose metabolism. Today, you've learned about 5 of them: sweet taste perception, intestinal glucose absorption, pancreatic beta cells, insulin sensitivity, and glycated hemoglobin. Perhaps the most surprising part is that researchers aren't looking at Gymnema simply as a plant that might lower blood sugar. They are also investigating how its compounds may interact with different processes involved in blood sugar regulation. But health information needs to go hand in hand with responsibility. If you have diabetes, prediabetes, or insulin resistance, talk to your doctor before starting any supplement. And if you found this information helpful, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who also wants to better understand how blood sugar regulation works. And tell me in the comments, had you ever heard of Gymnema sylvestre before? I'll see you in the next video.